Tonight, we drift toward the quiet heart of the Nevada desert, a place with no name on most maps, but known by almost everyone. Area 51, a strip of cracked clay ringed by mountains, watched from the shadows, sealed behind fences and silence. Some say it hides experimental aircraft. Others whisper of something far older, and not from here. What secrets lie beneath that pale, glowing lake bed? What crafts rest in hangars no satellite can see? And why, after decades, do so many still wonder what waits behind those ridgelines? Settle in. Dim the lights. Let the stillness of the desert guide you deeper. Tonight, we enter America's most whispered secret and begin to ask, what might be hidden inside Area 51? Chapter 1. The Desert That Shouldn't Matter. If you were to draw a line from Las Vegas north into the Nevada desert, about 90 miles out, you would find yourself in a landscape that seems designed by nature for keeping secrets. Here, in the shadow of the Timpahute Range, lies a dry lake bed called Groom Lake, a place so perfectly suited for hiding things that it's almost as if the earth itself conspired to create the ideal location for the impossible. Imagine walking across this ancient lake bed on a cool morning when the air is still and clear. Your boots would crunch softly on the hard-packed earth, a mixture of clay and salt that has been baked solid by countless summers and frozen by just as many winters. The surface stretches before you like a massive natural runway, flat as glass and nearly featureless. In some places you might find strange geometric patterns etched into the earth, marks left by aircraft that officially were never there. The silence in this place is profound. It's not just quiet. It's the kind of silence that seems to press against your eardrums, broken only by the distant whisper of wind through the Joshua trees that dot the surrounding hills. On a clear day, you can see for miles in every direction, watching the heat shimmer rise from the lake bed like ghostly dancers in the distance. But it's what you can't see that makes this place so extraordinary. Hidden among those seemingly empty hills are observation posts, sensors, and security measures that would make most military bases envious. The airspace above Groom Lake is more restricted than the airspace over the White House. Commercial aircraft are routed hundreds of miles around this patch of desert, leaving it isolated beneath an invisible dome of prohibition. The mountains that ring the lake bed form a natural amphitheater, sheltering whatever happens here from curious eyes. From the ground level, you can see the peaks of Tikaboo Peak and Bald Mountain rising like ancient sentinels, their rocky faces catching and holding the light in ways that change throughout the day. But climb to their summits, if you could, and you might catch a glimpse of something that shouldn't exist. The lake bed itself tells a story written in the language of geology. Thousands of years ago, this was a real lake, fed by streams from the surrounding mountains. Native people camped along its shores, leaving behind arrowheads and pottery shards that archaeologists would later find scattered in the sage. But the water receded long ago, leaving behind this perfect natural laboratory, a place where experimental aircraft could take off and land without fear of prying eyes. Weather patterns here are as predictable as clockwork. The desert creates its own microclimate, with clear skies more than 300 days a year. Morning temperatures can be surprisingly cool, even in summer, while afternoons bring dry heat that seems to press down from above like a heavy blanket. At night, the temperature can drop 40 degrees or more, creating conditions perfect for testing equipment that needs precise environmental controls. The very isolation that makes this place ideal for secrecy also gives it an otherworldly quality. Standing on the lake bed at dawn, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. You might understand why this landscape has inspired so many stories of visitors from other worlds. There's something about the vast emptiness, the impossible clarity of the air, the sense of standing at the edge of the known world that opens the mind to possibilities. Indigenous peoples who lived in this region for thousands of years had their own stories about this place. They spoke of lights in the sky, of spirits that moved through the desert at night, of places where the boundary between worlds grew thin. Were these ancient memories of natural phenomena, or something else entirely? The U.S. military discovered Groom Lake in the early 1950s when they were searching for a place to test aircraft that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. They needed somewhere remote, somewhere protected, somewhere that could keep secrets. In Groom Lake, they found all of that and more. They found a place that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of geography and politics, a place where the impossible might just be possible. As night falls across the lake bed, the desert transforms. The harsh edges of daylight soften into gentle curves. The mountains become dark silhouettes against a sky suddenly filled with more stars than seem possible. In this darkness, sounds carry for miles. The distant rumble of an engine, the whisper of something moving through the air, the soft crunch of footsteps on ancient earth. And in this darkness, questions multiply like stars. What happens in this place when the sun goes down? What moves through these skies when the world is sleeping? What secrets does this perfect, empty landscape hold? The desert keeps its secrets well. It always has. Chapter 2. Building the Invisible. In the early days of the Cold War, when the world balanced on the edge of nuclear annihilation, a small group of engineers and test pilots found themselves working in the most secret place in America. They arrived at Groom Lake in unmarked aircraft, their windows blacked out so they couldn't see the route. They lived in temporary housing that felt more like a mining camp than a military base. And they were building something that would change warfare forever. Picture those early days in the 1950s. The lake bed was still truly empty then, marked only by a rough runway scraped from the hardpan and a collection of trailers and Quonset huts that housed the world's most classified aircraft program. The men who worked there called it Watertown, after a joke about the absence of water, or sometimes simply the ranch. To them, it felt like the edge of civilization, which, in many ways, it was. The U-2 spy plane was born in this remote desert laboratory. Imagine watching its first flight. An aircraft so unusual it looked more like a giant glider than a military machine. With wings so long and delicate they had to be supported by wheels that fell away during takeoff, the U-2 could soar to altitudes no aircraft had ever reached. At 70,000 feet, above the weather and above most surface-to-air missiles, it could photograph vast areas of enemy territory with cameras so powerful they could read newspaper headlines from the edge of space. But building and testing such revolutionary aircraft required infrastructure that had never existed before. Deep beneath the desert floor, engineers carved hangars directly into the bedrock of the surrounding mountains. These underground facilities could house multiple aircraft while remaining completely invisible to satellite surveillance. Workers spoke in whispers of elevator systems that could lift entire aircraft from hidden bunkers to surface runways in minutes. The base grew in rings of secrecy, each layer more classified than the last. Surface facilities appeared normal enough. Runways, control towers, administrative buildings that could have belonged to any military airfield. But beneath the visible base, a second world took shape. Tunnels connected underground facilities in a network that some claimed extended for miles beneath the desert. Storage areas carved from solid rock could house equipment and materials for decades without detection. Temperature control in these underground spaces was critical. The desert's extreme temperature swings, scorching days and frigid nights, required sophisticated climate systems to protect delicate equipment. Deep underground, the Earth's natural temperature remained constant year-round, creating perfect conditions for sensitive work that couldn't be disrupted by weather. Access to these facilities was controlled with a precision that bordered on the obsessive. Workers arrived on unmarked charter flights from Las Vegas, their windows blacked out during the flight. Once at the base, they were transported in windowless buses to their work areas, ensuring that no single person could piece together the full layout of the facility. Many workers spent entire careers at Groom Lake without ever seeing more than the specific areas where they were assigned to work. The security culture that developed around these projects was unlike anything in previous military history. Information moved through the base on a strict need-to-know basis, with compartmentalization so thorough that engineers working on different aspects of the same project might never meet. Code names changed regularly, and even the code names had code names. Workers carried multiple security badges for different areas of the base, and losing one meant immediate investigation. As the U-2 program gave way to even more advanced projects, the infrastructure at Groom Lake expanded again. The SR-71 Blackbird, an aircraft that could fly at 3 times the speed of sound, required entirely new types of facilities. Specialized fuel systems, advanced radar testing equipment, and runways extended to accommodate aircraft that pushed every boundary of known technology. Rumors persisted of facilities extending far beyond what was visible on the surface. Workers spoke of underground areas, designated by mysterious alphanumeric codes: S1, S2, S4. Some claimed these facilities housed research that went beyond conventional aircraft development. Others suggested they were simply advanced storage and maintenance areas for the exotic aircraft being tested above ground. The base's power requirements grew exponentially as projects became more sophisticated. Electrical systems had to be designed to provide clean, uninterrupted power for sensitive equipment that could be disrupted by the slightest fluctuation. Backup generators, buried power lines, and redundant systems ensured that work could continue regardless of conditions on the surface. Water, always precious in the Nevada desert, had to be trucked in from hundreds of miles away. Every drop was carefully managed and recycled. Waste disposal required special procedures to ensure that nothing left the base that might provide clues about the work being conducted there. Even garbage was classified. Communication systems at Groom Lake were equally sophisticated. Secure telephone lines, encrypted radio networks, and satellite communications connected the base to the Pentagon, CIA headquarters, and defense contractors around the world. But these communications were carefully shielded to prevent electronic surveillance, using technologies that were themselves classified. As night falls over the modern Groom Lake facility, lights illuminate runways and taxiways in patterns that can be seen from space, if anyone is authorized to look. But much of the real work happens in areas where no lights shine, in spaces that appear on no public maps, in facilities that officially have never been built. The invisible base beneath the visible one continues to grow, expand, and evolve. Each generation of aircraft brings new requirements, new challenges, new solutions that push the boundaries of what's possible. And through it all, the desert keeps its secrets, protecting mysteries that may be even greater than anyone imagines. Chapter 3. Lazar and the Element That Shouldn't Exist. In the late autumn of 1989, a man named Robert Scott Lazar appeared on Las Vegas television station KLAS and told a story that would forever change how people thought about Area 51. Sitting in shadow to protect his identity, speaking in measured tones that carried the weight of impossible secrets, Lazar claimed to have worked on reverse engineering technology from crashed extraterrestrial vehicles at a facility called S4, located near Papoose Lake, just south of Groom Lake. Lazar's story unfolded like a dream half-remembered, detailed in some places, frustratingly vague in others. He described being taken to S4 in a bus with blacked-out windows, traveling through desert roads that seemed to lead nowhere. The facility itself, he claimed, was built into the side of a mountain, with 9 aircraft hangars that had been carved directly from the rock, and then camouflaged so perfectly they were invisible from the air. Picture walking through these underground hangars as Lazar described them. Vast caverns hollowed from living stone, with smooth floors and arched ceilings that stretched into darkness. The air would be cool and dry, carefully climate-controlled to protect the extraordinary machines housed within. Emergency lighting cast long shadows that seemed to dance as you moved, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a cathedral than a military facility. The craft Lazar claimed to have seen defied every principle of conventional aircraft design. They were small, perhaps 30 feet in diameter, with hulls that appeared to be made from a single piece of seamless metal. No rivets, no seams, no obvious joints or construction methods that could be identified with any known manufacturing process. The metal itself seemed to have properties that changed depending on how you looked at it, sometimes appearing matte gray, other times taking on an almost liquid quality that reflected light in unusual ways. Inside these craft, Lazar described spaces that seemed impossibly small for their external dimensions. The pilot areas, he hesitated to call them cockpits, were clearly designed for beings much smaller than adult humans. The seats, if they could be called that, were contoured for a body type that stood perhaps 3 to 4 feet tall, with proportions that suggested a large head relative to overall body size. The control systems were unlike anything in human technology. Instead of buttons, switches, or displays, Lazar described interfaces that seemed to respond to touch in ways that suggested they might be reading biological information from the operator. Panels that appeared solid would become transparent when touched, revealing complex patterns of light that pulsed and shifted in response to contact. But it was Lazar's description of the propulsion system that captured the most attention. He claimed the craft were powered by a stable isotope of element 115, an element that didn't officially exist in 1989, though it would later be synthesized in particle accelerators and added to the periodic table as moscovium. According to Lazar, this element could be manipulated to create a gravitational field that effectively bent space-time around the craft, allowing it to move in ways that ignored conventional physics. The process, as Lazar described it, involved bombarding the element 115 with protons to create element 116, which would immediately decay back to 115 while releasing antiprotons. These antiprotons would then annihilate with protons in a reaction that produced enormous amounts of energy with 100% efficiency, something that mainstream physics considered impossible. This energy would then be focused through what Lazar called gravity wave amplifiers, devices that could intensify and direct the natural gravitational effects of the element 115. By creating a localized distortion in space-time, the craft could essentially fall toward its destination, moving without creating any of the heat, sound, or atmospheric disturbance associated with conventional propulsion. Lazar's scientific background added a layer of credibility to his claims that simple hoaxers couldn't match. He demonstrated knowledge of physics and engineering that went well beyond what most people would know, and he spoke about complex concepts with the casual familiarity of someone who had worked with them firsthand. When pressed for details, he could provide technical explanations that, while unverifiable, showed a deep understanding of advanced theoretical physics. The element 115 that Lazar claimed to have worked with came in the form of small, triangular pieces that were surprisingly heavy for their size. He described it as having a distinct appearance, a metallic substance with an unusual orangish hue that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of view. The material was stable under normal conditions, but when subjected to intense proton bombardment in the specialized equipment at S4, it would begin to produce effects that defied conventional understanding. Security around the element 115 was reportedly extraordinary, even by the standards of Area 51. Lazar claimed that each piece was carefully weighed and tracked, with security measures that ensured not even microscopic amounts could be removed from the facility. Workers handled it using remote manipulation devices, and all work was conducted in sealed chambers that prevented any possibility of contamination or theft. The implications of Lazar's claims were staggering. If true, they suggested that the United States government had in its possession technology that could revolutionize transportation, energy production, and humanity's understanding of physics itself. But they also raised troubling questions about the source of this technology and why it was being kept secret from the world. Lazar's story included details about briefing documents he claimed to have seen, describing the history of extraterrestrial contact with Earth going back thousands of years. These documents supposedly contained information about different species of non-human intelligence, their home star systems, and their ongoing involvement with human civilization. The implications were so vast that they seemed to strain the boundaries of belief. Critics pointed to gaps in Lazar's educational credentials and questioned aspects of his story that seemed to change over time. His claimed degrees from MIT and Caltech could not be verified, and some elements of his account appeared to be influenced by popular science fiction. But supporters noted that many details of his story, particularly his descriptions of security procedures at Area 51, were later confirmed by other sources. The debate around Lazar's claims continues more than 30 years later. Mainstream science remains skeptical, pointing to the lack of physical evidence and the extraordinary nature of his assertions. But the questions he raised about what might be happening in the most secret corners of the military-industrial complex continue to resonate. As you drift off to sleep tonight, consider the possibility that somewhere in the Nevada desert, in facilities carved from living rock and hidden beneath mountains that look empty to the casual observer, work continues on technologies that could change everything. Whether that work involves reverse engineering crashed spacecraft or developing the next generation of human aircraft, the mystery remains as compelling as ever. The desert keeps its secrets well, but sometimes, just sometimes, those secrets find a way to whisper themselves into the world. Chapter 4, 9. Craft, 9 questions. In the deepest part of his story, Bob Lazar described something that would haunt the imagination of anyone who heard it. 9 aircraft hangars built into the mountainside at S4, each containing a craft of non-human origin, each one different from the others. Picture walking through these underground chambers in the soft light of emergency illumination, your footsteps echoing in spaces carved from ancient stone, approaching mysteries that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. The first craft, Lazar recalled, was the one he worked on most extensively. It was disc-shaped, about 30 feet in diameter, with a hull that seemed to be constructed from a single piece of seamless metal. The surface had an unusual quality, sometimes appearing matte and non-reflective, other times seeming to shimmer with an internal light that made it difficult to focus on directly. Touch the surface, and it felt neither hot nor cold, but somehow neutral as if it existed at exactly the temperature of your hand. This craft could be entered through a hatch that opened without any visible mechanism. The opening appeared seamlessly when approached, as if the solid metal simply remembered how to be an entrance. Inside, the spaces seemed impossibly small for the external dimensions, yet they felt complete, designed with an efficiency that suggested every millimeter had been considered and optimized. The second craft was noticeably different, larger, with a more angular design that suggested different origins or perhaps a different purpose. Where the first had curved lines that flowed like water, this one had geometric patterns etched into its surface that caught the light in complex ways. Some observers described these patterns as merely decorative, while others suggested they might serve some functional purpose related to the craft's operation. Each successive hangar revealed new variations on themes that seemed just beyond human understanding. The third craft was smaller, more delicate in appearance, with surfaces that seemed to shift between solid and translucent, depending on the viewing angle. The fourth appeared to be damaged, with sections that had been opened to reveal internal structures of impossible complexity. Networks of what might have been conduits or control systems that followed no engineering principles found in human technology. The hangars themselves told their own story. Each was carved to precisely fit its occupant, suggesting that the facility had been designed around the craft, rather than the craft being stored in pre-existing spaces. The walls were smooth and curved, following the natural contours of the rock while providing perfectly controlled environments for their mysterious contents. Climate control in these spaces was critical. The desert's extreme temperature variations, scorching days and freezing nights, required systems that could maintain precise conditions 24 hours a day. Humidity had to be controlled to prevent corrosion of unknown materials. Even the air pressure was carefully regulated, though the reasons for this remained unclear. The fifth craft showed evidence of extensive study. Panels had been carefully removed and replaced, with human-made brackets and measuring devices attached to various surfaces. This was clearly the focus of the reverse engineering efforts, an attempt to understand technology that operated on principles that seemed to violate known physics. Working on these craft required tools and techniques that pushed the boundaries of human capability. Conventional metalworking tools were useless against materials that seemed to exist in a state somewhere between liquid and solid. New methods had to be developed, new instruments created, new approaches to engineering that started from entirely different assumptions about what was possible. The sixth craft was perhaps the most unsettling. Larger than the others, it had sections that appeared to be living rather than mechanical. Surfaces that pulse slowly, as if with some internal rhythm, materials that seemed to respond to the presence of observers, darkening or lightening as people moved around them. This craft suggested technology so advanced that the distinction between biology and machinery had become meaningless. Personnel who worked in these hangars reported strange dreams and unusual experiences that seemed to intensify with exposure to the craft. Some described vivid dreams of flight that felt more real than waking life. Others reported sudden insights into complex mathematical or engineering problems they had been struggling with. A few claimed to experience brief moments of enhanced intuition or awareness that lasted for days after leaving the facility. The seventh and eighth craft were stored in adjacent hangars that could be opened to create a single larger space. These two vehicles appeared to be part of a matched set, with complementary designs that suggested they might work together in some way. Their surfaces contained similar geometric patterns, and when placed near each other, observers reported that these patterns seemed to resonate or respond to each other. The final hangar contained what appeared to be the most advanced craft of all. sleek and elegant. It seemed to embody principles of design that human engineering was only beginning to approach. This vehicle appeared to be in perfect condition, as if it had just landed rather than having been recovered from some distant crash site. Security around the hangar areas was layered and intense. Access required multiple levels of clearance with biometric scanners that verified identity at each checkpoint. Even authorized personnel were escorted by guards and were never allowed to enter the hangars alone. Everything that happened in these spaces was recorded and monitored, though the recordings themselves were classified at levels that few people had the clearance to review. The psychological impact of working with these craft was carefully studied and managed. Personnel underwent regular evaluations to ensure they could handle the stress of working with technology that challenged their fundamental understanding of reality. Some workers thrived in this environment, finding excitement and wonder in the daily confrontation with the impossible. Others found the experience overwhelming and had to be transferred to conventional projects. Each craft raised more questions than it answered. Where had they come from? How had they been acquired? How long had they been in government possession? And perhaps most importantly, what did their existence mean for humanity's future? The work at S4 proceeded slowly and carefully. Each discovery led to new avenues of investigation, new theories to be tested, new possibilities to explore. Progress was measured not in months or years, but in decades of careful study that gradually revealed glimpses of technologies that could revolutionize human civilization. As you imagine walking through these underground hangars surrounded by mysteries that represent either humanity's greatest discovery or its most elaborate fiction, consider the questions that would follow you home each night. What would it mean to touch something created by non-human intelligence? How would such knowledge change your understanding of Earth's place in the cosmos? And what responsibilities would come with such profound secrets? 9 craft, 9 repositories of impossible questions, 9 doorways into a universe far stranger and more wonderful than we had ever dared imagine. Chapter 5. Satellites can't see everything. In our age of Google Earth and constant surveillance from space, it's easy to assume that nothing on Earth's surface can remain truly hidden. Satellites circle the globe in carefully planned orbits, their cameras capable of reading license plates from hundreds of miles above. Commercial imaging services can provide detailed photographs of almost any location on Earth within hours of a request. Yet, Area 51 remains largely invisible to these watching eyes, protected by layers of deception and misdirection that would impress the greatest stage magicians. The art of hiding things in plain sight requires a sophisticated understanding of how surveillance systems work. Satellites follow predictable paths across the sky, their orbits calculated years in advance and tracked by enthusiasts around the world. At Groom Lake, this predictability becomes a tool for concealment. Activities that cannot be hidden can be timed to occur when no satellites are overhead, or when atmospheric conditions make clear imaging impossible. But timing is only the beginning. The physical infrastructure of Area 51 has been designed from the ground up to confuse and mislead orbital observation. Imagine looking down at the base from space and seeing what appears to be a conventional military airfield. Runways, hangars, administrative buildings arranged in patterns that seem entirely normal. But this visible layer masks a more complex reality below. Hangars at Groom Lake are not simply buildings. They are elaborate stage sets designed to hide their true contents. Some have roofs that appear solid from above but can be quickly retracted to allow aircraft to enter or exit. Others have multiple levels, with the most sensitive activities taking place in underground spaces that no satellite can penetrate. The visible hangars may contain nothing more than decoy aircraft or maintenance equipment, while the real work happens in caverns carved from the surrounding mountains. Camouflage at Area 51 operates on multiple levels. The most obvious involves painting buildings and equipment in colors that blend with the desert landscape. But more sophisticated techniques include the use of materials that absorb rather than reflect radar and optical wavelengths, making structures nearly invisible to both visual and electronic surveillance. Some of the most intriguing reports concern movable structures, buildings and hangars that can be quickly relocated or reconfigured to change the apparent layout of the base. Railroad tracks reportedly allow entire hangars to be moved to different positions, creating the impression that facilities have appeared or disappeared between satellite passes. These mobile structures would be particularly useful for concealing the testing of experimental aircraft from prying eyes. Underground facilities pose the greatest challenge for overhead surveillance. Tunnels and chambers carved into the bedrock of the surrounding mountains cannot be detected by conventional imaging satellites. These spaces can house aircraft, equipment, and personnel in complete secrecy, connected to surface facilities through tunnels that may stretch for miles beneath the desert floor. The construction of such underground facilities would require massive excavation projects, but even these can be hidden from satellites. Excavated material can be transported away from the site during night hours when imaging satellites are not overhead. Construction equipment can be painted in desert camouflage and positioned to look like natural rock formations from above. Temporary structures can be quickly erected to conceal work areas during sensitive operations. Heat signatures present another challenge for maintaining secrecy. Aircraft engines, industrial equipment, and large groups of personnel all generate thermal signatures that can be detected by infrared satellites. But these signatures can be managed and disguised through careful facility design. Underground spaces maintain stable temperatures that are difficult to detect from orbit. Surface activities can be scheduled during times when background thermal conditions make it difficult to distinguish artificial heat sources from natural ones. Electronic emissions from the base present yet another avenue for surveillance that must be carefully managed. Radar systems, communications equipment, and other electronic devices all produce signals that can be detected and analyzed from space. But these signals can be shielded, redirected, or made to appear as if they're coming from conventional military activities rather than exotic research programs. Deception operations at Area 51 may include the use of deliberately misleading activities designed to confuse potential observers. Aircraft that appear to be conventional military planes may actually be cover stories for more exotic vehicles. Test flights of experimental aircraft may be disguised as routine training missions. Even the personnel who work at the base may not be aware of which activities are real and which are elaborate deceptions. The base's location in the Nevada desert provides natural advantages for avoiding surveillance. The region's frequent dust storms can obscure satellite observation for days at a time. Temperature inversions in the desert air can bend and distort light in ways that make accurate imaging difficult. The isolation of the area means that ground-based observation is nearly impossible, leaving satellites as the primary means of surveillance. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of Area 51's concealment involves the manipulation of information about what satellites can and cannot see. By controlling the narrative about the base's activities, authorities can shape public expectations about what should be visible from space. If people believe that certain types of activities are taking place at the base, they may not look carefully for evidence of other, more exotic programs. The psychological aspects of satellite surveillance are as important as the technical ones. Analysts studying satellite images of Area 51 bring their own assumptions and expectations to the task. They see what they expect to see, and they may dismiss anomalies that don't fit their preconceived notions about what the base contains. This cognitive bias becomes another tool for maintaining secrecy. Commercial satellite imagery of Area 51 is readily available to the public, But this openness may itself be part of the deception. By allowing unrestricted access to certain views of the base, authorities can create the impression that nothing is being hidden. The most sensitive activities may take place in areas that are carefully excluded from commercial imaging, or in underground facilities that cannot be detected by any orbital platform. The dance between concealment and revelation at Area 51 continues with each satellite pass overhead. New technologies for space-based surveillance drive the development of new concealment techniques, while advances in camouflage and deception push satellite operators to develop more sophisticated detection methods. It's an endless arms race between those who would see and those who would remain hidden. As you look up at the stars tonight, remember that some of those moving points of light are satellites, their mechanical eyes scanning the Earth below for secrets and mysteries. But remember, too, that the most interesting secrets may be the ones they cannot see, hidden beneath mountains of stone and layers of deception, waiting in the darkness for their moment to emerge into the light. The desert keeps its secrets well, even from the eyes in the sky. Chapter 6. The Moonlink Theory. There are nights in the Nevada desert when the moon hangs so large and bright in the clear sky that it seems close enough to touch. Standing on the hard pan of Groom Lake, looking up at that ancient scarred face, you might find yourself wondering about the connections between Earth's most secret place and our mysterious celestial companion. Some researchers have proposed that these connections may be more than coincidental, that Area 51 and the moon may be linked in ways that challenge our understanding of both. The moon has always been an object of wonder and speculation. Its perfect size relative to the sun creates total solar eclipses that have inspired awe and terror throughout human history. Its gravitational influence controls our tides and may affect everything from plant growth to human behavior. But in recent decades, scientific observation has revealed details about the moon that are difficult to explain using conventional theories of planetary formation. Consider the moon's unusual characteristics. It's far larger relative to its parent planet than any other moon in the solar system. Its density suggests a composition quite different from Earth's. Yet analysis of moon rocks brought back by the Apollo missions shows isotopic similarities that indicate a common origin. Its orbit is nearly circular and lies almost exactly in Earth's equatorial plane, a configuration that would be extremely unlikely to result from a random capture event. Perhaps most puzzling is the moon's internal structure. Seismic studies conducted during the Apollo missions revealed that the moon rings like a bell when struck by meteorites or deliberately impacted spacecraft. This ringing effect lasts for hours, suggesting that the moon may be hollow or have large empty spaces within its interior. No known natural process can account for such a structure in a celestial body of the moon's size. Some researchers have proposed that these anomalies are not accidental. They suggest that the moon may be an artificial construct, a massive space station placed in Earth orbit by an advanced civilization for purposes we can only guess at. This theory, while dismissed by mainstream science, has found support among certain researchers who point to ancient texts and traditions that describe the arrival of the moon in Earth's sky. If the moon is indeed artificial, its builders would have possessed technology far beyond anything in human capability. The engineering required to construct a structure nearly 2,200 miles in diameter and position it in a stable orbit around Earth would represent an achievement that dwarfs any human construction project. Such technology would necessarily involve principles of physics that we have not yet discovered or fully understood. This is where Area 51 enters the story. If the moon is an artificial construct, and if evidence of this fact has been discovered by human space programs, then the most sensitive research into this discovery would necessarily be conducted at the most secure facilities available. The underground laboratories of Area 51, with their layers of security and compartmentalized research programs, would be ideal locations for studying technology that could revolutionize human understanding of physics and engineering. The timeline of Area 51's expansion corresponds intriguingly with the development of America's space program. The facility grew dramatically in size and importance during the same decades that humans first traveled to the moon and began conducting detailed scientific studies of its composition and structure. As NASA's public programs revealed more about the moon's unusual properties, classified programs may have been working to understand the implications of these discoveries. Whistleblowers like Bob Lazar have described seeing technology at Area 51 that operates on gravitational principles completely unknown to mainstream physics. Such technology would be necessary for any civilization capable of constructing and positioning an artificial moon. The element 115 that Lazar claimed to have worked with could theoretically provide the immense amounts of energy required for gravitational manipulation on a planetary scale. If researchers at Area 51 have been reverse engineering technology recovered from the moon or its builders, this would explain many of the unusual characteristics reported by workers at the facility. The craft described by Lazar and others would represent attempts to understand and replicate propulsion systems designed for use in space, where gravitational manipulation would provide enormous advantages over conventional rocket propulsion. The secrecy surrounding both Area 51 and the true nature of the moon would be maintained for obvious reasons. Public revelation that the moon is artificial would fundamentally challenge every aspect of human understanding about our place in the universe. Religious, philosophical, and scientific worldviews would require complete revision. The social and psychological impact of such a revelation would be incalculable. Communication between Earth and the moon would require technology that operates on principles unknown to public science. Conventional radio communications would be inadequate for coordinating activities with structures or beings on an artificial moon. The development of such communication technology might well be one of the primary research goals at facilities like Area 51. Ancient texts from around the world contain references to a time before the moon appeared in Earth's sky. Greek authors wrote of the proselenes, people who lived in Arcadia before the moon came. Zulu traditions speak of a time when the sky was different. Before Congolos, the moon was brought to watch over the earth. These traditions may preserve memories of the moon's artificial placement in Earth orbit. Modern astronomical observations have revealed other anomalies that support the artificial moon hypothesis. The moon's surface is covered with a layer of dust that appears to be much older than the underlying rock, suggesting that the moon may have traveled through space for long periods before arriving at Earth. Impact craters on the moon's surface show unusual characteristics that some researchers interpret as evidence of artificial construction beneath the surface debris. The moon's influence on human consciousness and behavior has been noted throughout history. The word lunacy derives from the belief that the moon's phases affect mental states. Biological rhythms in many species are synchronized with lunar cycles in ways that suggest a deeper connection than simple tidal effects. If the moon is indeed an artificial monitoring station, these influences might be intentional rather than accidental. Research into the moon's possible artificial nature would necessarily involve the most advanced technology available to human civilization. Gravitational field generators, exotic matter propulsion systems, and communication devices operating on quantum entanglement principles would all be required to understand and interact with an artificial moon. These technologies would be far too sensitive to develop in conventional research facilities. The underground laboratories at Area 51 would provide the perfect environment for such research. Shielded from electromagnetic interference and hidden from public view, these facilities could house equipment and conduct experiments that would be impossible anywhere else. The compartmentalized security structure would ensure that even most workers at the facility would have no idea of the true scope of the research being conducted. If the moon is indeed artificial, its builders may still be present and active. Communication attempts using technology developed at Area 51 might have established contact with these entities. Such contact would represent the most classified information in human history, known only to a small group of individuals with the highest possible security clearances. The implications of an artificial moon extend far beyond simple scientific curiosity. If the moon is a monitoring station, what is it monitoring? Are its builders benevolent observers, or do they have other purposes? How long have they been watching Earth, and what do they plan for humanity's future? These questions would drive research programs that might continue for decades or centuries. The craft allegedly stored at Area 51 might not be vehicles that crashed on Earth, but rather shuttlecraft designed to travel between Earth and the Moon. Their unusual propulsion systems and small size would make them ideal for transport between a planetary surface and an orbital station. This would explain why they appear to be designed for beings smaller than humans. They would be optimized for the reduced gravity environment of an artificial moon. Weather modification technology, reportedly tested at Area 51, might be derived from systems used to maintain the moon's position and orientation relative to Earth. The precise orbital mechanics required to keep an artificial moon in stable orbit would involve manipulation of gravitational and electromagnetic fields on a massive scale. Understanding these systems could lead to weather control technology that operates on similar principles. The timing of certain geological events on Earth correlates intriguingly with changes in the moon's orbital characteristics. Some researchers suggest that the builders of the moon have been actively influencing Earth's development for thousands of years, using gravitational manipulation to trigger ice ages, volcanic events, and other changes that have shaped human evolution and civilization. As night deepens over the Nevada desert and the moon rises higher in the clear sky, these possibilities seem less far-fetched. The silence of the desert, broken only by the distant hum of generators and the soft whisper of wind through the sage, creates an atmosphere where the impossible becomes merely improbable. Under that ancient watching face of the moon, the secrets hidden beneath Groom Lake take on new significance. Perhaps the craft in those underground hangars are not alien visitors from distant stars, but Earth-built vehicles designed for travel to humanity's closest celestial neighbor. Perhaps the technology being reverse-engineered there comes not from crashed spacecraft, but from direct communication with the builders of an artificial moon. Perhaps the greatest secret of Area 51 is not what has come to Earth, but what Earth has discovered about the ancient construction hanging in our sky. The moon keeps its secrets as well as the desert does. But on clear nights like this, when the boundaries between Earth and sky seem to dissolve in the perfect clarity of the desert air, those secrets seem almost close enough to touch, almost close enough to understand, almost close enough to change everything we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. The connection between Area 51 and the moon remains a theory, a possibility, a question mark hanging in the night sky above the most secret place on Earth. But as you drift towards sleep under that watchful lunar gaze, consider the possibility that the answers to humanity's greatest questions may be hidden not among distant stars, but in the familiar light of our nearest celestial companion. Chapter 7: Memory Holes and Missing Men. In the classified world that surrounds Area 51, information disappears as surely as footprints in shifting desert sand. Documents that once existed are suddenly missing from filing systems. Personnel records show gaps that cannot be explained. Researchers who once spoke freely about their work fall silent, claiming they never worked on projects that multiple witnesses remember them discussing in detail. This systematic erosion of memory and evidence creates a landscape where truth becomes as elusive as a mirage shimmering on the distant lakebed. The concept of institutional amnesia runs deep in the Black Projects world. Unlike conventional military secrecy, which simply classifies information and locks it away, the deepest programs seem to actively erase their own history. Files are not merely classified. They are reclassified out of existence. Their contents distributed to separate repositories where no single person can piece together the complete picture. Consider the experience of researchers who spent decades working on classified projects at Area 51, only to find that their security clearances were revoked and their access to their own work was permanently denied. These men and women, who dedicated their careers to advancing the boundaries of human knowledge, suddenly found themselves cut off from the fruits of their labor. The projects they had worked on became mysteries to them, accessible only through fragments of memory that seemed increasingly uncertain with the passage of time. Dennis Mariani was one such researcher. He worked for years in the underground facilities at Groom Lake, contributing to projects that pushed the boundaries of conventional physics. His colleagues remember him as brilliant and dedicated, a man who could solve engineering problems that seemed impossible to others. But when he tried to publish academic papers based on his work, he found that all record of his security clearances had vanished. According to official records, he had never worked on classified projects at all. Mariani's attempts to reconstruct his work history led him into a labyrinth of bureaucratic dead ends. Personnel offices claimed to have no record of his employment. Security departments insisted that his clearances had never existed. Colleagues who had worked alongside him for years suddenly seemed unable to remember details of their shared experiences. It was as if a carefully orchestrated campaign was underway to erase not just the classified work, but any evidence that the work had ever taken place. Similar stories emerged from other researchers who claimed to have worked on exotic technology at Area 51. Dr. Michael Wolff, who said he participated in programs involving recovered extraterrestrial technology, found that his academic credentials and work history became subjects of controversy after he began speaking publicly about his experiences. Documents that should have supported his claims either could not be located or were heavily redacted when released through Freedom of Information Act requests. The psychological impact of this systematic erasure cannot be underestimated. Researchers who had spent their careers working on projects they believed were of vital importance to national security suddenly found themselves questioning their own memories. Had they really worked on anti-gravity propulsion systems? Had they actually seen craft that operated on principles unknown to mainstream physics? Or had they become victims of elaborate psychological operations designed to confuse and discredit potential whistleblowers? Some researchers reported experiencing what they described as memory adjustment procedures during their time at classified facilities. These involved sessions with personnel who were identified as security specialists, but who seemed more interested in psychological evaluation than conventional security screening. During these sessions, researchers would be asked to recount their work experiences in detail, ostensibly for security review. But many reported that their memories of these sessions themselves became vague and uncertain, as if the conversations had taken place in a dream. The technology for memory manipulation, while still crude by the standards of science fiction, has been a subject of legitimate scientific research for decades. Techniques using electromagnetic fields, pharmaceutical intervention, and sophisticated psychological conditioning can create false memories, suppress real ones, or make individuals uncertain about the accuracy of their own recollections. Such techniques would be invaluable for maintaining security around projects that must remain completely secret. Project MKUltra, The CIA's notorious mind control research program involved extensive experimentation with memory suppression and modification. While the program was officially terminated in the 1970s, the techniques developed during those experiments would remain available to agencies that needed to protect the most sensitive information. The underground facilities at Area 51 would be ideal locations for continuing such research under even deeper levels of classification. Witnesses to unusual activities at Area 51 often report that their memories of these events become increasingly vague over time. Details that seemed crystal clear immediately after the experience gradually fade, leaving behind only general impressions and a persistent sense that something important has been forgotten. This pattern suggests the use of memory suppression techniques that allow the immediate recollection necessary for debriefing purposes, while preventing long-term retention of classified information. The families of researchers who worked on classified projects often become unwitting victims of these memory operations. Spouses report that their partners would return from work trips with gaps in their recollection of where they had been or what they had done. Children grew up with fathers who seemed to have two separate identities: the loving parent they knew at home, and the mysterious professional who disappeared for weeks at a time on assignments that could never be discussed. Documentation of these memory operations is naturally scarce, but occasional glimpses emerge through heavily redacted documents released decades after the fact. References to cognitive security protocols and memory management procedures appear in budget documents and personnel evaluations, suggesting systematic programs designed to control the flow of information through human memory, rather than simply restricting access to physical documents. The digital age has created new challenges for memory suppression operations. Electronic communications leave trails that are difficult to completely erase, and the interconnected nature of modern information systems makes it harder to create clean breaks in the documentary record. But these same technologies also provide new tools for memory manipulation, using sophisticated algorithms to identify and suppress information that relates to classified programs. Social media platforms and search engines can be programmed to de-emphasize certain types of content, making it less likely that researchers will encounter information that might trigger suppressed memories. Online discussions of classified topics can be subtly influenced by participants who may themselves be unaware that they are serving as agents of disinformation. The result is an information ecosystem that naturally tends to suppress rather than preserve memories of the most sensitive activities. Professional consequences for researchers who attempt to discuss classified work can be severe and long-lasting. Security clearances, once revoked, are almost impossible to restore. Professional references become unavailable when former colleagues are forbidden from acknowledging that they ever worked together. Academic institutions distance themselves from researchers whose work history contains unexplained gaps or inconsistencies. The most effective memory suppression operations may be the ones that never reveal themselves as operations at all. Researchers who experienced memory adjustment procedures might be led to believe that their confused recollections are the result of stress, illness, or simple aging. The psychological pressure of working on classified projects provides a convenient cover story for memory problems that may actually be the result of deliberate intervention. As dawn approaches over the Nevada desert, painting the mountains in soft shades of gold and pink, the question remains: how much of what we think we know about Area 51 represents authentic information, and how much has been shaped by deliberate efforts to confuse and misdirect? The researchers who worked in those underground facilities may themselves no longer be certain of the answer. Their memories, like the morning mist rising from the lakebed, may have been carefully shaped by forces they never fully understood. in a world where memory itself becomes a battlefield. The greatest victory may belong to those who control not just information, but the very capacity to remember that the information ever existed. The desert keeps its secrets not just by hiding them, but by making us forget that there were ever secrets to be found. Chapter 8. From Roswell to Groom Lake. In the summer of 1947, something fell from the sky near Roswell, New Mexico, and started a chain of events that may have led directly to the most classified research programs at Area 51. The official story, that a weather balloon crashed on a rancher's property, has never satisfied those who believe something far more extraordinary took place in the desert that July. As we trace the possible connections between Roswell and Groom Lake, we enter a realm where speculation blends with documented fact, creating a narrative that is as compelling as it is unverifiable. Picture the New Mexico desert in July 1947. Vast expanses of scrubland broken by mesas and arroyos, a landscape where something unusual could lie unnoticed for days or weeks. Mac Brazel, the rancher who first discovered the debris field, described materials unlike anything he had ever seen. Metal that was incredibly light yet impossible to bend or cut, and strange symbols that resembled no known writing system. The initial military response to Brazel's discovery was swift and comprehensive. Personnel from Roswell Army Airfield, home to the world's only nuclear bomber squadron, cordoned off the area and began a systematic recovery operation. Witnesses described seeing trucks loaded with debris leaving the crash site under heavy guard, bound for destinations that were not disclosed to local authorities. Major Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer who first examined the debris at the crash site, later stated that the materials he saw were not of this world. Marcel had extensive experience with military hardware and experimental aircraft, yet he insisted that the debris displayed properties that could not be explained by any known technology. His testimony, given decades after the event, remained consistent despite intense scrutiny and pressure to recant. The speed with which the military changed its official story about the Roswell incident suggests that higher authorities quickly realized the sensitive nature of what had been recovered. The initial press release, which stated that the military had recovered a flying disc, was retracted within hours and replaced with the weather balloon explanation. This rapid reversal indicates decision-making at levels far above the local military command. If exotic materials were indeed recovered at Roswell, they would have required the most secure and sophisticated research facilities available to the U.S. military. In 1947, such facilities were limited, but by the early 1950s, Area 51 was being developed as the most classified research installation in the country. The timing of Area 51's expansion, coming just a few years after the Roswell incident, may not be coincidental. Transportation of sensitive materials from Roswell to Area 51 would have required careful planning and absolute security. The route across New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada would have taken the convoy through hundreds of miles of desert, much of it through sparsely populated areas where unusual military activity could be conducted without attracting attention. Rest stops would have been planned at secure military installations, with the cargo transferred between vehicles to prevent any single driver from knowing the complete route. The underground storage facilities at Area 51 would have been ideal repositories for materials that needed to be kept in controlled environments while being studied by teams of specialists. The cool, dry conditions beneath the Nevada mountains could preserve exotic materials indefinitely, while teams of scientists and engineers worked to understand their properties and potential applications. Witness accounts from Area 51 in the 1950s and 1960s describe seeing materials and technologies that seemed impossibly advanced for their time. Workers spoke of metals that could not be cut with conventional tools, substances that seemed to generate their own energy, and control systems that responded to touch in ways that suggested some form of artificial intelligence. These descriptions align remarkably well with accounts of the debris recovered at Roswell. The compartmentalized nature of research at Area 51 would have made it possible to study Roswell materials without most workers ever knowing their origin. Teams working on metallurgy might analyze exotic alloys without being told where they came from. Electronics specialists might study unusual control systems without understanding their connection to other research programs. Only a small number of individuals with the highest clearances would have access to the complete picture. Reverse engineering programs at Area 51 may have spent decades attempting to understand and replicate the technologies allegedly recovered at Roswell. Progress would have been slow and difficult, requiring the development of entirely new scientific theories and manufacturing techniques. Some aspects of the technology might remain beyond human understanding even today, stored in those underground vaults like archaeological artifacts from a far more advanced civilization. The secrecy surrounding both Roswell and Area 51 serves multiple purposes. Beyond the obvious military advantages of keeping advanced technology away from potential enemies, there are psychological and social factors that make disclosure extremely difficult. Public revelation that the U.S. government has been in possession of non-human technology for decades would raise profound questions about what other secrets have been kept from the American people. Other crash sites may have contributed materials to the research programs at Area 51. Reports of unusual aerial phenomena and crashes in remote areas of the American Southwest continued throughout the 1940s and 1950s. Each incident would have generated its own recovery operation, with materials transported to Area 51 for analysis and storage. Over the decades, the underground facilities may have accumulated a substantial collection of artifacts from these various events. The alleged crash retrievals represent only part of a larger pattern of unusual activities in the American Southwest during the early years of the Cold War. Atomic weapons testing, experimental aircraft development, and classified research into exotic propulsion systems created a complex web of secret activities that provided cover for even more sensitive programs. The public's focus on conventional military activities may have deflected attention from far more extraordinary research. International implications of crash retrievals would have extended far beyond simple military advantage. If non-human technology was indeed recovered and successfully reverse-engineered, it would have provided the United States with capabilities that could fundamentally alter the balance of power on Earth. Such advantage would need to be carefully managed to prevent destabilizing international relations while maximizing strategic benefit. The psychological profiles of individuals chosen to work on crash retrieval materials would have been carefully screened for stability, discretion, and ability to function effectively while dealing with information that challenged fundamental assumptions about reality. Many researchers might have been recruited without being told the true nature of their work until after extensive vetting and psychological evaluation. Documentation of crash retrievals and subsequent research would have been minimized and carefully controlled. Unlike conventional military programs, which generate extensive paperwork for oversight and accountability purposes, these programs would have operated under special protocols designed to leave as little documentary evidence as possible. What records do exist would be fragmented across multiple agencies and classification systems. The connection between Roswell and Area 51 remains a matter of speculation rather than proven fact. But the timeline of events, the testimony of witnesses, and the patterns of classified research activities create a compelling narrative. Whether or not exotic materials were actually recovered in 1947, the belief that they were has shaped public perception of both incidents and influenced decades of speculation about what secrets lie hidden in the Nevada desert. As morning light spreads across the lake bed at Groom Lake, illuminating the runways and hangars where some of the world's most advanced aircraft have been tested, It's worth considering that the most extraordinary machines in those facilities may not be the products of human engineering at all. They may be reverse-engineered copies of technologies that fell from the sky more than 70 years ago, bringing with them questions that we are still struggling to answer. The desert remembers everything, even secrets that were never meant to be preserved. In the shifting sands between Roswell and Groom Lake, those memories may be slowly working their way back to the surface. Chapter 9. The Door That Doesn't Open. There is a door in the Nevada desert that has never been opened. At least not by anyone willing to talk about what lies beyond it. This door exists, not as a physical barrier, though such barriers certainly exist throughout Area 51, but as a metaphor for the ultimate boundary between the known and the unknowable, between the secrets that can be revealed and the mysteries that must remain forever sealed. Imagine standing before this metaphorical door in the quiet hours before dawn, when the desert air is cool and still, and the only sounds are the distant hum of generators and the whisper of wind through the sage. The door appears ordinary enough. Perhaps a simple metal barrier set into the side of a mountain, secured with conventional locks and guarded by systems that seem merely routine. But appearances in this place are always deceptive. The door that doesn't open represents more than just another level of classification or security clearance. Represents the point beyond which human understanding itself may not be equipped to venture. Behind this door lie questions that have no comfortable answers, truths that would fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of its place in the universe, and knowledge that might be more burden than blessing. For decades, researchers, journalists, and conspiracy theorists have searched for ways to open this door. They have filed Freedom of Information Act requests, conducted interviews with former workers, analyzed satellite photographs, and pieced together fragments of testimony from witnesses whose credibility varies from impeccable to questionable. Yet the door remains closed, protected not just by official secrecy, but by the very nature of the secrets it guards. Some who have claimed to approach this door describe feeling a strange reluctance to proceed, as if some instinct warns them that certain knowledge comes with a price too high to pay. Others report that their investigations simply hit walls that seem to rebuild themselves faster than they can be torn down. Documents disappear from archives. Witnesses recant their testimony, and promising leads dissolve like mirages in the desert heat. The psychology of secrets suggests that some information may be inherently unstable, too powerful to be contained within conventional frameworks of human understanding. Knowledge of technologies that violate known physical laws, evidence of non-human intelligence, or proof of realities that contradict fundamental assumptions about existence itself might necessarily exist in a state of perpetual uncertainty, neither fully revealed nor completely concealed. The door that doesn't open may protect us as much as it protects whatever lies beyond it. Human society has evolved sophisticated mechanisms for dealing with gradual change and incremental revelation of new knowledge. But sudden, paradigm-shifting disclosures have historically led to social upheaval, religious crisis, and psychological trauma on a massive scale. The custodians of ultimate secrets may have concluded that humanity is not yet ready for certain truths. Those who work closest to this metaphorical door often develop a particular mindset that allows them to function effectively, while living with profound uncertainty. They learn to compartmentalize their knowledge, separating what they know from what they suspect, and what they suspect from what they fear might be true. This psychological adaptation becomes a form of protection, allowing them to sleep at night despite being surrounded by questions that could drive others to madness. The door exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. There is the literal door, the physical barriers that protect the most classified areas of Area 51 from unauthorized access. There is the bureaucratic door, the layers of security clearances, need-to-know restrictions, and official denials that prevent information from flowing to the public. And there is the epistemological door, the barrier between what can be known through normal human means of investigation and what may require entirely new ways of thinking about reality. Ancient traditions from around the world speak of forbidden knowledge, information that was deliberately kept from humanity for its own protection. The tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden, Pandora's box, the secret names of God in Kabbalistic tradition, all represent the same concept of truths that are simultaneously dangerous and irresistible. Area 51 may represent a modern manifestation of this ancient archetype, a place where forbidden knowledge is both pursued and contained. The technology required to maintain the door's security evolves constantly, adapting to new threats and new methods of investigation. What began as simple physical security has expanded to include electronic warfare, psychological operations, disinformation campaigns, and perhaps even more exotic means of protection that operate on principles not yet understood by mainstream science. Visitors to the restricted areas around Area 51 often report experiences that seem to discourage further investigation. Electronic equipment malfunctions in ways that cannot be explained by conventional interference. Individuals experience sudden onset of fear or disorientation that makes them reluctant to continue their approach. Some describe feeling as though they are being watched by unseen observers who somehow project a sense of warning or threat. The door that doesn't open may be guarded by systems that operate on human psychology rather than conventional security measures. Advanced understanding of how perception and memory work could create protective barriers that exist primarily in the minds of potential intruders. Such systems would be far more effective than physical barriers, since they would prevent people from even wanting to discover what lies beyond the door. Remote viewing experiments conducted by various intelligence agencies have reportedly encountered similar barriers around Area 51. Psychics attempting to gather information about the facility describe hitting walls of static or interference that seem designed to prevent mental intrusion. Some report experiencing feedback that suggests active countermeasures designed to protect against psychic reconnaissance. The possibility that the door protects not just human secrets but non-human ones adds another layer of complexity to its existence. If Area 51 houses technology or information provided by non-human intelligence, the security measures protecting it might themselves be based on principles that transcend human understanding. Such protection might be necessary not to prevent human access to alien technology, but to prevent alien technology from accessing human minds. Scientific investigation of the door's existence faces inherent limitations. The very act of studying certain phenomena may alter them in ways that make accurate observation impossible. Quantum mechanics suggests that the observer and the observed are inextricably linked. And this principle may apply with particular force to information that exists at the boundaries of human knowledge. The door that doesn't open serves as a perfect metaphor for the human condition itself. We are creatures driven by curiosity, compelled to explore and understand, yet constantly confronted by limits to our knowledge and capability. The existence of the door reminds us that mystery is not simply the absence of knowledge, but a fundamental aspect of reality that may persist regardless of how much we learn. Those who have spent their lives studying Area 51 often reach a point where they no longer seek to open the door, but simply to understand its nature and purpose. They become comfortable with uncertainty, finding meaning in the questions themselves rather than in any answers they might provide. This shift in perspective represents a form of wisdom that may be the only appropriate response to mysteries that transcend human comprehension. The door will likely remain closed for the foreseeable future, protected by forces both mundane and possibly extraordinary. But its existence serves an important function, reminding us that the universe still holds secrets worth protecting and mysteries worth preserving. In a world where information flows freely and privacy becomes increasingly rare, the door that doesn't open stands as a monument to the power and necessity of the unknown. As you contemplate this door in your mind's eye, standing silent and immutable in the Nevada desert, remember that some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. Some secrets are not meant to be revealed. And some doors are not meant to be opened. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. The mystery itself may be more valuable than any truth that lies beyond it. Closing meditation. The eternal mystery. The stars are beginning to fade now in the eastern sky, where the first hint of dawn touches the distant mountains surrounding Groom Lake. The long night of stories and speculation draws to a close, but the mysteries we've explored together will continue long after the sun rises over this ancient desert landscape. Let yourself drift back to that place we began, standing at the edge of the vast Nevada desert, feeling the cool sand beneath your feet and the endless sky above. But now the darkness is softer, more welcoming. The questions that seemed so urgent in the bright light of curiosity have settled into something quieter, something that feels more like companionship than challenge. The secrets of Area 51, if they exist at all, remain safely locked away in their underground chambers and mountain hideaways. Bob Lazar's Element 115 continues to exist in that strange realm between science and speculation. The craft in their hidden hangars, real or imagined, rest silently in the darkness. The door that doesn't open remains sealed, protecting whatever lies beyond from eyes not yet ready to see. And perhaps that's as it should be. Some mysteries are not problems to be solved, but invitations to wonder. Some questions are not riddles demanding answers, but gentle companions for the journey through the unknown. The desert has taught us this lesson over and over, that the most beautiful things often exist in the spaces between certainty and doubt, in the shimmer of heat mirages that dance just beyond reach. As you settle deeper into rest, let these thoughts move through your mind like the soft wind that stirs the sage on distant hills. The mysteries of Area 51, whether grounded in reality or born from our collective need to believe in something greater than ourselves, have given us something precious, a sense that the universe still holds surprises, that human knowledge has not yet cataloged every wonder, that somewhere in the vast desert night, impossible things might still be possible. The researchers who have dedicated their lives to understanding these mysteries, the believers and the skeptics, the witnesses and the investigators, the dreamers and the scientists, all have contributed to a story that is larger than any single truth or falsehood. They have kept alive our capacity for wonder, in an age that sometimes seems to have explained away all the magic. Feel your breathing slow now, matching the gentle rhythm of the desert wind. Let your thoughts become as soft and wandering as the sand that shifts across the empty lake bed. The questions that brought us here tonight can rest now, settling into the comfortable uncertainty that is the natural state of all truly profound mysteries. The moon still hangs in the western sky, that ancient companion that may or may not hold secrets of its own. Its silver light falls across the hidden installations of Groom Lake, illuminating runways and hangars where tomorrow's technologies may be taking shape, or perhaps illuminating nothing more than the ordinary machinery of human ambition and military necessity. In this gentle hour before dawn, both possibilities seem equally mysterious, equally beautiful. The desert remembers everything, the ancient peoples who first walked these salt flats, the test pilots who pushed experimental aircraft to the edges of space, the researchers who may have touched technologies beyond human imagination, and the dreamers who have looked up at the stars and wondered if we are truly alone. All of these memories rest now in the silence, part of the vast story that is still being written in the sand and stone of this remarkable place. Your own journey through these mysteries becomes part of that story now. The questions you've carried with you tonight, the possibilities you've entertained, the wonder you've felt, all of this joins the collective dream that surrounds Area 51 like a protective aura. You become part of the mystery simply by acknowledging its existence, by allowing it to live in your imagination, by choosing wonder over cynicism. As sleep begins to claim you, imagine yourself walking one more time across that ancient lake bed, but now, in the soft light of dawn, the harsh edges of night have given way to gentle curves. The mountains stand like patient guardians, keeping their secrets with the same dignity they have maintained for millions of years. The air is sweet with the scent of sage and the promise of another day full of ordinary miracles. Behind you, the runways and facilities of Area 51 fade into the morning haze, becoming part of the landscape rather than dominating it. Whatever secrets they hold are safe in their underground chambers, waiting for a time when humanity might be ready to understand them. Or perhaps they will remain secret forever, adding their mystery to the endless catalog of things we may never fully know. The beauty is not in the knowing, but in the not knowing. The wonder is not in the answers, but in the quality of attention we bring to the questions. The magic is not in the destination, but in the willingness to journey into uncertainty with open hearts and curious minds. Rest now in this place of gentle mystery, where the impossible and the inevitable dance, together in the shimmering heat of the desert air. Let the stories we've shared tonight become dreams, and let the dreams become part of the larger dream that is human consciousness, reaching toward the stars. The desert will keep its secrets as it always has, but it will also keep the wonder, the questions, the beautiful uncertainty that makes the journey worthwhile. Sleep now, knowing that somewhere in the vast Nevada night, mysteries are waiting patiently for dreamers brave enough to imagine what might be possible. The stars fade, the moon sets, and the eternal desert begins another day of keeping its secrets and nurturing its dreams. And in that gentle space between sleeping and waking, between knowing and unknowing, between the possible and the impossible, all things remain beautifully, mysteriously, perfectly open to wonder. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler, through the mystery. May your sleep be filled with the quiet magic of unanswered questions, and may you wake tomorrow with your capacity for wonder renewed and refreshed, ready for whatever impossible things the day might bring. The desert dreams on, and we dream with it.